Lymphocytus stood in the square kicking at loose gravel for a while. He wasn't enthusiastic about talking to people, had never been, really, but eventually he forced himself to approach someone and asked if there were any magicians in the keep. Most answered briefly, or not at all. Someone just shook their head and kept walking. Another said, "Priests, at least. Don't know if they can do magic, though." Someone else said sharply, "Don't ask that, and especially not so loud." A third person said only, "Not out here." No one mentioned names. No one pointed out any specific person. No one offered help. After a few responses like that, he noticed the question made people more guarded, that conversations died faster than usual, which was saying something, even for someone like Lymphocytus. It didn't take long to reach the conclusion that in this keep, you probably shouldn't talk about magic at all. Bit disappointing, he had to admit. Newly graduated with his fingers practically itching to demonstrate what he could do, and the mere mention of magic made people purse their lips. But if you don't adapt, you get left behind. So he changed tactics and asked instead if there were any learned men in the keep. That went better. He got more responses, though still no lengthy discussions, which suited Lymphocytus well enough, honestly. He managed to learn that priests were plentiful and they kept to the chapel. Scribes and the bailiff's people also qualified as learned, though Lymphocytus himself didn't consider literate and learned the same thing. But some of the bailiff's men kept diaries and ledgers for goods. The last person Lymphocytus asked said something cryptic, that inside the inner part of the keep there was a man who reads more than he fights, if you know what I mean. Lymphocytus wasn't entirely sure he understood what the person meant, but he laughed uncertainly, which turned out to be the correct response. Left standing in the square, he made a quick assessment. The bailiff was probably where Sir Roland would go. So I'll go to the chapel, he decided. Lymphocytus left the square's movement behind and headed toward the stone building that looked most elaborate, or rather, least ugly. A long, narrow stone structure with a bell tower. If this isn't a chapel, I don't know what is, Lymphocytus thought, and pushed open the wooden door. When he stepped inside, the soundscape shifted immediately. The keep's noise dampened to a distant hum as the door swung shut behind him. In here, mostly footsteps on stone, the faint creak of wooden benches, and the low rush of air moving through the space. The room was large and open, simple. Rows of wooden benches led toward the altar in the east. Light fell at an angle through the colored glass window above the altar, casting patches of color across the floor and walls. It smelled of wax, cold stone, and something he couldn't quite place. Old fabric, maybe. In the southeastern corner stood the heavy pedestal with the offering box. Coins rattled faintly when someone passed nearby with heavy steps that vibrated up through the stone. An older man stood further into the room, close enough to clearly hear anything said there. Simple clothes, but vestments nonetheless. Straight posture. A finely carved staff rested against one hand, not ornate, but well-made, and a ring caught the light when he gestured. He spoke quietly with an acolyte who stood with hands folded, mostly nodding. Okay, Lymphocytus thought. That's the priest, or maybe even a bishop, and those are apprentices. At least, they're too young to be fully ordained priests. He found himself wondering how priestly education actually worked. What separated a priest from a cleric? Was there some centralized school where they taught all the rites and customs of different gods, and then you chose to specialize in one, the same way Lymphocytus had done with magic at the Arcane Academy back home? Or was it one school per god? Or maybe it was more like any other craft. You apprenticed until you could hold mass yourself. One of the acolytes moved further into the room, away from the altar, arranging something at the benches. His gaze slid toward Lymphocytus when he entered. Not suspicious, at least it didn't seem that way. but Lymphocytus would probably need to demonstrate he belonged here if he wanted to ask questions later. Otherwise, it would go like it had with everyone in the square, cold shoulders and eyes finding the ground. He decided to figure out which god was worshipped here first. That was step one. So he studied the symbols and wall paintings. The furnishings didn't reveal much, and there were no direct statues or figures in the artwork, just decorations. Not elaborate, but repeated. The altar was clean, without idols, but behind and around it, the same sign recurred, a stylized light breaking through darkness, like a flame in stillness. Vigil, almost. On the ends of the benches, the mark was faintly carved, worn smooth by hands. On the acolytes' simple robes, the same symbol appeared, embroidered in thread that had once been bright but had now dulled and gained patina. There were no offerings of meat or incense, no blood signs. Light, order, and guardianship were central. A deity connected to protection, community, and boundaries rather than conquest or salvation. This was clear. This chapel wasn't built for missionary work. He'd been standing here several minutes and no one had approached him yet. So what was it then? A place for those who already belonged, a god for structure and cohesion. Helm, Lymphocytus thought, and walked to the offering box and dropped a coin in, with emphasis so it clattered properly against the others. He got looks, which he'd expected. Both acolytes glanced at him. The one at the altar seemed occupied, but the one arranging hymnals in the benches, less so. Lymphocytus bowed politely toward him and tried, "Helm be with you." The acolyte stopped for a moment, hand still on the fabric of his robe. He met Lymphocytus's gaze, stopped himself from looking surprised, then nodded briefly and correctly. "And with you, if you so will and wish," he answered. Damn, wrong god, Lymphocytus thought. Well, at least it didn't seem to have caused any damage. And now he had at least initiated contact. That was usually the worst part. Lymphocytus closed the distance between them and asked in passing if he had time to talk for a moment. The acolyte's movement pattern was calm, controlled, almost performative. "A moment," he said, "if it concerns something general." He moved almost sideways a few steps toward Lymphocytus and showed with his body that they should move to one side and not disturb those who were here to listen to God rather than their conversation. The older man with the staff remained at his position further forward. He did nothing that directly concerned them, but it was obvious he was keeping them under observation, even though he pretended to gaze out over the hall. The acolyte looked at Lymphocytus and waited. "Sex. Right, so it's like this," Lymphocytus said. "I'm a scholar from a city some miles from here, quite a few miles when it comes down to it, but that's beside the point. I'm newly graduated, but without patron or lodge. I was told this was where you came if you wanted to prove yourself useful and advance in your service. I'm not getting direct answers from the men with steel out there, so I took the chance to come in here and speak with learned men like yourself. Maybe we speak more the same language." He paused, trying to read the acolyte's expression, which remained carefully neutral. He continued, "I'm wondering if I've come here for nothing, or if there's work to be done. And naturally, I'm also wondering if you have books or scrolls for sale." The acolyte's attention sharpened. When Lymphocytus mentioned books, something shifted in his gaze, more watchful than suspicious. "You haven't come here for nothing," he said finally. His voice was low, correct. "Everything is as it should be. But the keep doesn't hire the learned for learning's sake. Here, you make yourself useful first. Then, doors open." He hesitated a moment before continuing. "Work exists, always. But it's not arranged here in the chapel, and not for strangers without any context." A brief pause. "And our books aren't for sale." Then Lymphocytus noticed the shadow looming over him. He turned sharply. The older man with the staff had moved closer without Lymphocytus hearing anything. What a ninja, he thought. The acolyte also noticed the pressing presence. His words came faster now, more careful than before. If you seek guidance, you can return when you've done something that shows who you are here. The older man still said nothing, but his presence had changed the conversation. This must be the limit of how far this conversation can go, especially with the priest present, Lymphocytus thought. Lymphocytus thanked them, bowed deeply to the priest, and withdrew. He understood the hint, and what wasn't said was also clear. As Lymphocytus pulled back, he let his gaze linger a second too long, enough to read the person who could control a conversation without saying a single word. He wasn't great at reading people, but he understood somehow anyway that the older man wasn't here for the ritual. His attention wasn't on individual visitors, but on the whole, and especially on the flow. Who moved where? Who said what to whom? This was someone tracking patterns. Lymphocytus left the chapel with a clear picture of the man, someone who didn't forget faces, who'd already filed Lymphocytus away in some mental category. He felt uneasy, almost dirty somehow. He shivered and tried to shake it off as he moved away from the chapel, back toward the noise and disorder of the keep's courtyard, where at least the surveillance was honest and obvious. Sir Roland wasn't a thinker. He acted fast and thought later. Sometimes it worked out fine, and usually he was already somewhere else by the time he'd stepped on anyone's toes, so he never had to hear their complaints anyway. If you want something done in this world, you talk to whoever's in charge, Roland thought, and his name carried weight, had opened doors before, so why wouldn't it work now? Brickjaw was admittedly a low nobility family, which was why the title Sir had followed Roland his entire life like a joke he couldn't escape. He was about as far from a knight as you could get, closer to a bouncer or hired muscle if you wanted to be honest about it. But if people assumed he was a knight and it gave him access to the keep's inner quarters, he wasn't going to stop them from believing it. Roland left the courtyard's movement behind and headed up toward the inner gate. The passage was narrow and sloped gently upward. The walls were close enough to touch, pierced by arrow slits. Above, movement flickered at the edge of his vision, guards adjusting grips, following him without staring directly. 2 soldiers stood in the passage itself, fully armored, halberds propped casually on shoulders, but their gazes were straight and professional. They talked to one another without looking at each other. Looks insane, Roland thought. Their posture sharpened as he came within speaking distance. One of them raised his hand, palm outward. No direct threat in the gesture, Roland felt, but unmistakably a boundary. "This is where you stop," the guard said neutrally. He was fairly handsome in that worn, weathered way, rugged. That's how I'll look in a few years, Roland thought, trying to decide if that was reassuring or depressing. Behind the handsome one, more movement. An officer further in behind the gate, partially obscured by shadow and stone. No one introduced themselves, but no one shouted. The situation was still, apparently, under control. Third time's the charm, Roland thought. If I don't manage to say something coherent this time, I'm asking Father to sponsor me for a speech coach or something. He cleared his throat and spat a glob of phlegm to the side. Then he spoke. My name is Sir Roland of Brickjaw. You may have heard of my father. I want to speak with whoever's in charge here. The guard didn't react as though the name meant anything. No recognition, no shift in posture toward the better. The opposite, actually. A brief glance went sideways to the other guard, who shrugged and shook his head slightly with half-closed eyes and pressed lips, the universal expression of, "Never heard of him." "No," the handsome guard said, firm and resolute. "That name doesn't mean anything to me." The officer further back stepped forward, so he was now clearly visible in the passage's light. Okay, someone with higher rank, Roland thought. Now I really need to get my act together. You don't talk to whoever's in charge here, the officer said calmly. His voice was friendly on the surface, but without any opening. You talk to us, and that's more than sufficient. He seemed to examine Roland, from boots to the top of his untamed hair. Roland didn't like it, that slow assessment, the way it made him feel like inventory being cataloged. And if you're talking to us, you do it because you have business, not a name. The two guards adjusted their grip on their halberds, almost imperceptibly. The gate behind them remained closed, separating Roland from whoever was speaking to him. Something broke in Roland then. His mother had been the same way when she didn't get what she wanted, but she cried. Roland didn't cry. He got obstinate and angry instead. But does it have to be so fucking difficult and needlessly complicated all the time? I came here to do work, but no one will give you work until you have at least 5 years of senior experience on your resume. Who am I supposed to talk to who has problems, so I can solve those problems, so some other guy can then give me a job, so I can do that job and maybe get an actual meeting with whoever's in charge here? Roland's words cut through the passage's formal tone. His voice was sharp and the frustration unmistakable. A few heads on the wall turned a notch. Some laughter and spite drifted down. Not particularly cruel. Roland had heard worse. The handsome guard reacted immediately, taking half a step forward so the distance closed. He angled his shield up slightly, more as a marker than protection. Enough, the officer said quietly, to the handsome guard, not to Roland. Roland didn't understand how, but something in what he'd said had landed with the officer. He saw something honest there behind the facade, something that felt familiar. Recognition, maybe, or just exhaustion with the same bureaucratic circles everyone complained about but no one fixed. Problems exist, the officer continued after a brief pause. Always. He tilted his head slightly to the side, seemed to study Roland again, now with a different kind of look, evaluating. But those who shout and rant rarely get what they want in here. You've just ensured we'll remember you, not for your courage or fighting spirit, but for your bad temper. The officer made a brief glance toward the guards. The tension released slightly. Go back out to the courtyard, he said. If you want to be useful, there are people out there who can't afford to be picky. Help them, make it visible. Then maybe someone in here will start caring. He stepped back. The conversation was over. Roland stood at the inner boundary with the words ringing in his ears. He hadn't exactly been thrown out, but he wasn't satisfied with how the situation had gone either. Damn you, father, Roland thought darkly. Hope you can afford a really good speech coach for me. He turned and walked away, with anger that comes from knowing you've handled something badly without understanding how to have done it differently. The courtyard felt louder when he returned to it, or maybe he was just more aware of the noise after the focused quiet of that stone passage. People still moved with purpose around him, still ignored his presence. He'd accomplished nothing except confirming what he should have already known, that names meant less than actions here, and his particular name meant nothing at all. But that he was used to. Roland's brain worked overtime. Come on, roly-poly, he thought to himself. You can't walk into the meeting empty-handed, standing there like a chastened schoolboy. Who has work then? Then it hit him. You don't talk to guards about jobs. They guard the people who get jobs done. You talk to whoever has too much work for anything to actually get accomplished. The bailiff, of course. Why didn't I think of that earlier? He said it out loud without meaning to, and a woman carrying a basket of turnips jumped, dropping one that rolled toward his feet. He stopped it with his boot. She glared at him. He picked up the turnip, brushed off some dirt, and placed it back on top of her basket. "Don't take it so seriously, ma'am. Everything works out if you just think a little sometimes, you know?" he said cheerfully, clicking his tongue twice and swaggering off with that lonely, jovial confidence that came from not quite understanding social cues. Then he realized he had no idea where he was going. He turned back. "Hey, ma'am?" She turned around reluctantly. "You got a bailiff around here? And where does he sit?" The bailiff's tower rose more deliberately than its surroundings. The stone was cleaner. The wood around the door was worn, but in exactly the right way, from use, not neglect. It smelled less like stables and more like paper, oil, and metal. That bodes well, Roland thought. The less something smells, the less people usually want to get their hands dirty. Roland himself had no problem with that, he realized, looking down at his own paws. When did I last bathe? And must reek of horse and highway. At the entrance stood a soldier who didn't look like he was guarding for show. His gaze was already on Roland as he approached, completely neutral, like he was waiting for something. Wonder what? Roland thought. Probably me. "Sir Roland, reporting for duty with the bailiff." The words landed in the doorway. The soldier didn't answer immediately. He looked at Roland long enough to weigh threat level, posture, and tone of voice. Then he stepped sluggishly aside half a step and drummed the back of his fingers against the doorframe. From inside came the sound of a chair scraping back quickly, a voice, low and presumptuous. "Enter." The room beyond was cool and still. A table covered with papers and maps took up most of the floor space. Along the wall stood a man in well-fitted armor, helmet off on a stool nearby, gaze straight ahead like he wasn't entirely there. Behind the table sat a wiry scribe with straight posture and ink-stained fingers. The pen continued moving while he spoke without looking up. People don't look at each other in here, apparently, Roland thought. "Name and business," the wiry little man said. Near the door stood another soldier, silent, still, with a depression in his skull like he'd taken a serious blow from a warhammer or something. At least this person was actually watching what Roland did. Roland wished he wouldn't, because now he'd missed what the scribe said. The man sighed. "Yes, I asked you for a name and business." He spoke slowly and exaggeratedly, as if Roland were slow. But Roland wasn't slow. He just felt stressed in situations that involved making good impressions. He got stuck on details that didn't help him. The pens rasping against parchment. How the scribe didn't look up. What that sunken skull on the soldier looked like. All that blocked his thoughts. And you can't speak faster than you think. Or can you? Roland tested it, rattling off the sentence so quickly he barely registered what he was saying himself. "My name is Sir Roland of Brickjaw. I was sent here from the gate guard because there are things to do, and I have 2 strong hands and a thick skull, so I can do things." The scribe stopped writing, pen tip freezing mid-word. He'd been writing delegation order. He looked up for the first time, and his gaze became sharper, like he'd just understood something. "No," the man said calmly. His voice was low even. "You were not sent here." He lifted the pen from the paper and set it back in the inkwell. Then the little man leaned slightly forward over the table. Maybe not threatening exactly, hard to be with that body, but decisive nonetheless. "The gate guard doesn't send people to me because there are things to do. I ask the gate guard to summon people when I need something handled." The scribe, who was more likely actually the bailiff, leaned back in his chair and continued with his notes. 2 hands and a skull aren't much for credentials, he continued. "Those are prerequisites. If that were enough, I wouldn't have a stomach full of ulcers." A brief pause. The air felt denser. "You want to work." then you start where work doesn't require trust. When you've made a difference, it gets noticed. I notice faster than most. And when it's noticed, someone will say my name to you, not the other way around. The bailiff made a dismissive gesture with the hand he wasn't writing with. Roland stood there with his armor, his hands, his thick skull, and now also with the knowledge of how the keep actually functioned. With mild frustration in his voice, he said demonstratively, "Look, I get it, okay? You don't have jobs. You just have people who write papers and people who guard the inner courtyard and people who guard the wall. I've figured out the whole thing. It's a pyramid scheme, all of it. Yes, I'm leaving. No, first I'm eating, then I'm sleeping. Then I'm finding my own job. And then people will say, 'Oh, why did we write off Sir Roland?' Thanks for nothing, sir." Roland bowed ironically. Roland's words got no immediate response. The bailiff let him finish speaking. That in itself was an answer. When Roland fell silent, the bailiff said only one thing, calmly and without raising his voice. "You're not written off. You're here inside the walls, aren't you? You're unproven. So go do something about it."